Joker, filet-a-deux. I guess I'm curious to know your thoughts on it because I haven't heard great things, and some of you guys have seen it already. So I guess I'd kind of like to know.
If we're spoiling it, I am also going to get spoiled. I have not seen it yet. After this stream, I'm going to watch it so I can have my own thoughts. But I also have not heard great things. But
and you probably won't
reserve my
either.
judgment for what I actually see.
Right. Well, how do we begin this then?
It's the sequel no one asked for and should not have been made. Clearly.
Yep.
Yeah.
I heard it's like a bad opera.
Yeah.
I mean, the musical numbers, for example, like I assume it's not a complete musical. It's not like every sentence is communicated through song or anything. So it's more.
What's funny is their weird comments about how it's not a musical, and then they describe a musical with some of them. I now understand what they were trying to say after seeing the movie because it is weird. Like I've seen plenty of musicals. This one didn't quite feel like it reached musical. It was almost there, but a lot of songs are very short and some of them are a little bit confusing as to exactly what the hell is even going on, where they're taking place, what have you. And then a lot of the movie is not musical. There's a lot of just normal scenes.
Yeah, and the musical aspects of it too, like some of the things are just fever dreams of Jokers, and then some of them seem like they really take place, and they'll feel very shoehorned into the movie. The original film had a ton of musical aspects to it, and I see where they were going to try and get into a musical, or at least like that was their passage, but it really doesn't pass the test.
It's also not even a good musical. I mean, a good musical, the songs advance the story, like in The Wizard of Oz, or other good musicals, Les Mis, right? They advance the story. They're just random, put in, some are ironic, and they're also sung in a weird way where they're kind of singing and talking. And
a lot of speaking, singing,
yeah, speak, sing, which is...
I found as well, a lot of the song choices were very like, something happens in the scene that we understand very clearly in terms of what's happening with characters, and then the song doesn't tell you much more at all. It'll almost be like, just to give you an example, it's not actually in there, but if you shot someone dead, and then the song was, I shot someone dead, done shot someone dead, and you're like, yeah, okay.
That would be good.
But you sort of just, once it's over, you're like, okay. I think Gary had mentioned it. It's like some of it's very impressive. The sets, the way that they choreograph it, the lighting and everything. But the story is you're like, what's going on?
I mean, is it almost like, I don't know, are the musical numbers just put in there to jazz up the movie?
Yeah, that's how I thought of it.
Because is it like if you took them out, would it just be like quite a boring story?
I mean, there's connections to be made. Definitely, his character is definitely interested and connects himself through music to his like evolution and stuff. But we're almost circling to what I probably would prefer to talk about, which is even in the first 10 minutes of this film, I was like, wait, what? Because I rewatched Joker, and I was like, this is not where I would expect this to. Like, why are we? And again, because I agree with a lot with Gary's review. I'd recommend it, the one he put out. Why have we reset? We've reversed back quite significantly on where the character was and what journey he'd taken. And by the time you push, let's say, 3/4 of the way through the film, I felt like we were finally catching up to the end of the first film. And then I started to realize, and this is kind of my overall broad thoughts, I'd be curious if Cynic and Chris have a similar perspective. This film felt like it didn't like what people thought of the first one, and so retold the story and changes the ending and says, this is what I meant.
Yeah, and that's I would completely agree, because I remember Todd Phillips said in 2019 that are we doing spoilers?
Yeah, we are. The fans have spoken, and they said we can do it.
All right.
So all right, well, I'll reveal it then. He said in 2019 that Arthur Fleck most likely was not the real Joker, and indeed he is not. And so the ending that he truly wanted, he ended up just saying, he was saying it bluntly in the interview, and it was with Comic Book Resources. You can find the article, and that's exactly what he did in the end. He is not the real Joker, because he ends up getting stabbed to death by the real Joker.
who could be the real Joker. We don't really know.
Well,
but
it's
implied,
heavily
implied.
implied, and if
Yeah.
there's anything about Todd Phillips is that he doesn't give a crap. Like, he is explicit, so he has him carve his own Glasgow smile in there to really drive it home that this is supposed to be Joker here.
I mean, I suppose that does answer the question of like everyone was pondering, like, okay, if this is set in the 80s and Joaquin Phoenix is like 50 years old, how can he possibly be the Joker when Batman's grown up or when Bruce Wayne's grown up?
You know what, Drigger? I would have preferred that he just found a time travel machine instead of this.
I mean, well, honestly, it's probably another reason why you should never have done a sequel. Like, that story didn't need to answer that question. It's like, okay, this exists in its own little pocket universe, and it's really just the story of this guy with his illness, and it's very up in the air about how much of it is actually real and so on, which I liked the ambiguity of that ending. And from what you're describing here, it's like, well, we get those questions answered. And to pick up on the point you made earlier, like, I think you said something about like, oh, it's almost like they didn't like the fact that people enjoyed his character in the first movie. There was a headline that was doing the rounds today, actually, on Twitter, and it's like, Joker Part 2 has a message for the fans. Go fuck yourselves. Kudos to this follow-up to the 1 billion grossing hit for delivering something more than a carbon copy of the Angry Clown original. But who exactly is this musical sequel for? That's a good question, actually.
When you reach the end of the first film, and there's a couple of different takeaways and interpretations, which I'm totally open to, I find it really interesting to discuss. But part of, I think, when he's on the police car and he's like celebrating with the crowd, you get a sense that he's finally become comfortable with the man that he's become as a result of all of the traumas he's experienced and his perception of them altering as he gets more and more broken. And then he reaches like an equilibrium, and that is the character of the Joker. And if someone said, like, are you saying he's a good person? Are you saying he's a role model? I'd be like, of course not. I'm talking about him, how well built of a character he is, how interesting he is, and how I believe fully, almost in like, I want to see how his story goes forward in the sense of what kind of life he may live and what kind of influence he may have. But I don't need a sequel. I can get it all from the film itself, from the ending even. That one shot, I can get it. I get the story.
It's so funny that people are so black and white about these things as well. It's like, oh, your take might be, well, I found aspects of his story that were actually quite sympathetic, because he goes through a lot of trauma and he doesn't start out necessarily as an evil man, but he's pushed down this path of becoming this figure, and especially this media figure. And so people interpret that as like, oh, so you're saying it's okay to go around murdering people, right?
Yeah, that was one of the great things about the first movie was, and why for 5 years, ever since it started blowing to the box office, like for me, who I love the first one, I was like, please, 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 just because you see money signs, don't give it a sequel, because that ruins a lot of, I feel like, the discussion that was created around the first one. Is this a warning about mental illness? Is this a warning about how you treat each other, about differences in society? Like, there's so many different things you can talk about and discuss from that. Just a sequel, even if it had been really solid, even just that kind of does take away a little bit of that mystery and that ambiance and that ambiguity of everything that went down in the first one, which is why I didn't want a second one. But Warner Brothers, you got to remember, Warner Brothers didn't make a lot of money on the first one because they had different investors come in. They put up very little of the money for the first one because they didn't believe it was going to do anything. It was other people that invested that $50 million. So they didn't make nearly as much as you would expect off a $1 billion movie with a $50 million budget.
And in this case, they invested $200 million in the sequel. I was just curious to how much they spent on it. Four times as much. Why? It doesn't need to cost $200 million unless there's some crazy like city getting destroyed by a meteor or something in this movie that I don't know about. Like, what is it that costs $200 million?
I think their idea
scene of that degree. So there's a big explosion at one point in the film.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, there is indeed. I think their avenue was like, even if it makes half as much, they'll still at least break even. Now I'm curious if it'll even do that.
Yeah, I don't
really not liking this.
I can't predict a single thing about how much this is going to make. It's people are throwing around the word nihilistic a lot. I understand why. You are left a little sort of rudderless at the end in terms of like, oh, what? Something I was curious for for those who saw it. The opening animation, Gary said he quite liked it. That's the thing that set me on worry immediately. The animation's awesome, but the story the animation tells, what did you guys think of it?
First, I actually liked it too. I thought it was clever, but unnecessary, pointless.
Well, so
really,
yeah, I agree,
don't,
Chris.
I don't agree. As weird as this sounds, I didn't agree with the animation. So the animation is he turns up to Murray's show, and then his shadow like jumps onto him, takes over or whatever, or jumps out of him, sorry, and goes onto the stage, does all the crazy shit, and then he comes out like confused and a bit worried, trying to see what's going on and work with the shadow, and then the shadow jumps onto him with the makeup and everything, and then he gets hauled away for the crimes of the shadow, right? The whole film has a lot of lines to do with this. It's basically all about it. The whole film is, who is Arthur Fleck? Is he the Joker? Is he Arthur Fleck? Is he somewhere in between? And a lot of characters try to argue he's got a split personality as a way to cope with the trauma of his younger life. And so he's not really responsible for the actions of the Joker. But, you know, again, spoilers, by the end of the film, he believes fully and completely near the end of the third act that it was him that did it. There is no Joker, and that the Joker is something that people kind of have made up and they like, and it's just not true. It's not anything. It's very kind of depressing, and that's when like Harley leaves him as a result of that.
Yeah, and then they pull a Zack Snyder and go really overboard with it, and he gets like graped in the showers by the guards.
So this is a definitive to me a disagreement with what the first film said. I don't see them as compatible. It's almost as though it's like a what if. It's like, would you like to see a different version of this story? It's like, well, I didn't like that one. I prefer the first one, actually. Very interesting and strange to watch. But yeah, that opening animation, I was like, oh shit, is that going to be the point of the story? That the whole time he's suffering as a result of the actions of the shadow self, which I never even got the impression of. But I think it's supposed to set you in an assumption of that might be it. But then by the end, he's like, no, it was all me, but there's no Joker. Which I think both of those suck compared to what I thought Joker 2019 was about, which was becoming a new man, having a completely new outlook on life, and being able to consolidate all of that pain and that trauma into something that brings him the life he wanted.
I think part of the, I guess the thesis of the first movie, as I recall, was like the effects of celebrity on him, or at least people's perception of what he is. Like he becomes kind of a symbol for the downtrodden people of Gotham, regardless of what Arthur Fleck, the man, is. The Joker becomes something else to them, and he becomes like a symbol of like resistance and rebellion and stuff. And that's what they're essentially worshipping at the end when he's on that cop car. Like, do we get more of that here, or what? Because like the trailers make it seem like he's a celebrity now, and like the trial that he goes through is like a big showbiz trial.
They kind of redo the arc of the first film. He starts super depressed, alone, and sort of meh. He meets Harley. She gasses him back up. And he has a thing again of getting the makeup and the suit on. He's like, yes, I'm Joker again. It starts to really rev up everyone else. He gets all of his fans and everyone into it. And then by the time you hit the third act, he realizes, you know what? I'm not. And again, because we're going full spoilers here, they blow up the courthouse. Harvey Dent gets half of his face wounded, by the way. I thought that was just like, there he goes. And then, he gets out, and this guy dressed in the full Joker makeup is like, oh my God, it's the Joker. Like, let's get out of here. And they're talking about blowing up things and giving people what they deserve. And he gets freaked out. He's like, oh God, what have I created, you know? And runs away, and then gets captured again, and then gets knifed and dies.
What a lovely story.
So are there any scenes from this film that you would say stand out, like in the first one when he's dancing kind of like down the stairs?
I would say the musical aspects, they like the cinematographer did a brilliant job with this, and they look more beautiful, but nothing is as iconic as like the things you just will remember, whether you liked the first movie or not. There are some images from that film that really will always stand out. And this one really doesn't have that, in my opinion.
I enjoyed a lot of the cinematography, but without the writing and without my investment, it felt a little thin. You know, I was like, okay, that looks really good.
Yeah,
the whole thing fell flat for me. I saw it in a 100% sold out IMAX screening, including the front rows. When the movie ended, There was silence. You could hear a pin drop. People got up and left. No applause. And this is Burbank, California. This is, they applaud for shit. But no one said a word and walked out sad. It was very, and I think there are no real standout scenes. I mean, I thought Lady Gaga was very good. Joaquin, very good. Mr. Puddles, probably the standout scene. Puddles. That was the standout. And he was in the first movie too.
He was great. Honestly, he was really good.
Great. That scene, very funny and dark at the same time. That's the only real standout. But to me, that first movie, how do you top him in the bathroom dancing with himself, where he you see he's imbued with confidence,
and it's why they show it again.
Right? They repeat the best scene from the first
show
movie
you.
The sequel.
It feels like the first half, if not more, is a bad repeat of the first film, like a worse repeat of the first film, just to then get us back to where we were at the end of it, and to then say, by the way, what you thought it was, wasn't it? And it's like, okay, that seems unnecessary, but all right, if you felt the need to do that.